Hi, I'm Warwick from Harder and Steenbeck, and this week we're going to bring you another questions from the comments video. I think it's really valuable that we keep on doing this because when we get questions in the comments, sometimes I'll read them and I'll think, wow, that's a question that a lot of people need to get the answer to, and then I think it warrants making a video about it. So Steve is going to be reading out your questions. So Steve, if you'd like to go ahead with the first question.
Okay, I'm just getting started with the airbrush. I've just picked up the Ultra. What are some other essentials that I might want to get started?
Okay, so I'm going to take this question as a request for, what's the minimum that I can set up with without kind of overspending on stuff I don't need to start, okay? So first thing is you've got an Ultra airbrush, so thanks very much for joining us. You're going to need an air compressor. There's a lot of information out there telling you that you need a tank. You don't need a tank. It's nice to have, you don't need a tank. Most air compressors without tanks nowadays are doing a really good job of providing a pulse-free airflow. So it's not 100% necessary to have a tank. These very small little compressors that you screw directly on the airbrush, they're becoming more of a thing nowadays. Be careful with them. Use them within the airbrush brand that they're sold for, but then also make sure that you trust that brand, that they really know what you're needing to do with the airbrush and their system is capable of it, because they tend to be not very powerful. And when you have a not very powerful compressor with a quality airbrush, with any airbrush in fact, you get a lack of atomization. And a lack of atomization, unfortunately, kind of torpedoes the thing that we really love the airbrush for, which is this ability to do beautiful gradations and control of transparent color. So just be a little bit careful with them. Then we've got to think about how to get air from the compressor to the airbrush. Two options, broadly speaking: the very thin vinyl hoses, which are really cool if you just want a super lightweight setup. Where they're not quite so cool is if you run over them with your chair, you probably will damage them. If you don't want to do that, the braided hoses are just amazing. I mean, the first studio that I worked in, I think the braided hoses there, I know they were more than 15 years old, so they're certainly robust. If you're looking to buy once and never buy again, get a cloth braided hose. Going on from there, you've really got to think about looking after your airbrush in some way. I'd encourage you to get some kind of airbrush holder. So you get the ones that clamp on the side of your table. We do this one here at H&S, which personally I just love this design because it's so simple. Tripod, really secure, somewhere to put your airbrush when it's got paint in it. I'd really encourage you to invest in some kind of an airbrush holder. Then you've got to really think about what you're going to do when you come to clean. So first thing is get yourself a nice brush. Don't get a little brush because you think that the airbrush is a little thing. Get a big brush. The reason for that is you don't want to get the ferrule of a little brush anywhere near your plated surfaces or your needle or your nozzle or anything like that. I think a number 6 or number 8, number 10 brush works really, really good as an airbrush cleaning brush. So get one of them. You can either get a normal shape brush or a flat cut brush, really doesn't matter, but I would go for those kind of sizes. The white synthetic bristles are great because they're relatively tough. Coming back to cleaning again, I would really strongly encourage one of this kind of format of cleaning pot. Reason why is when you come to clean your airbrush, you create more spray than probably in the whole rest of your painting process. And you don't want that to go into the air, because if it does, you can breathe it in. Also, it'll create a lot of dust that will settle around your studio, and nobody likes that. These are great because they coalesce that atomized cleaner and paint mix into a liquid that sits in the little jar. And then the air pressure that's driving that comes out of the exhaust port, which is filtered. So it's a super effective way of minimizing the particulate that you put into the air that you work in and are breathing in. In terms of breathing, do you need a mask? In a bigger room with a bit of ventilation, if you're using one of these, probably not. I think it's optional. If you, a really effective way of checking if you need a mask in whatever space you're airbrushing in, and bear with me, I know it sounds a bit gross, but very practical, blow your nose after you've done a session. You know what color it should be. If it's anything else, you need to think about a mask, because that means that color is going into your body. So that's a good way of looking at that. I think it's really important when you're working with an aesthetic, clearly, that you need to have good light. So what kind of light do you need? If the light is too blue, okay, it's difficult to see detail well, okay? So a warmer light is better. Obviously, daylight is optimal, but if you can't get a daylight bulb, then just make sure you get a warmish light. Then the other thing in terms of really understanding your color values is don't get a light that's too green. Okay, you want to be not towards the green side of the spectrum if you can possibly avoid it. So I think that covers lighting. And then what other things could we think about that we really might need? Yeah, okay, so we're talking about paint. So you're going to need paint because obviously painting is what we're trying to do. When you're starting out, it's fun to use food coloring for your first couple of hours because it's just so easy to paint with. I think that with the innovations that we've made on the new Ultra, that step is less necessary now because it's so easy to control clogging with the airbrush with the new Ultra. So just make sure whatever paint system you're going to paint in, I'd really encourage you to keep your life simple by using the thinner that comes from that paint brand and the cleaner that comes from that paint brand. So be prepared with those. Undoubtedly, you can experiment with all this stuff later and mix things up and so on, but establish your understanding of how to paint first before you start doing that. So I think if you have those things on your bench, you're probably good to go.
Can you use water instead of thinner to mix your paints?
Okay, so you can definitely use it to thin water-based acrylic paint. Absolutely no question about it. No question at all. It works really, really well. What are the drawbacks of it? It's really simple, and it is controllable. So if you just use water to thin your paint, you'll typically find that water's like a retarder, sort of ish. Okay, it's got a fairly slow rate of flash off compared to even water-based acrylic thinners. So if you want your paint to dry a bit slower, actually do use water as a thinner. Okay, it does work really well. But bear in mind that the problem that you can get is, particularly if you're trying to build up an opaque color, I would encourage you that for that, water's probably not your best choice because there you're looking to put quite a bit of paint on there to get opacity. And water becomes problematic when you are looking to put down a little bit more paint. It's not impossible to do, you just have to make sure that you're very focused on putting each layer down and not allowing it to become wet on the part. If you allow it to become wet, what tends to happen with acrylics is because this paint film now has a large amount of water in, you can get what's called clumping. And that's where the pigment can move within this water film because it's so much more thinner and it doesn't have much binder in it. They can move around a bit and they tend to move and attract. And then you get this sort of slightly, like, you know, little bit of a textured finish to it. It's very, very slight, very, very slight. But if you don't want it, then it's a little bit annoying. When you're looking to build up sort of very, very controllable transparency, it's arguable that water is actually quite a good thinner to use because it makes the paint flow very, very well. And if you're doing that, you're putting paint down really, really thin anyway if you're looking for these very subtle transparencies. So it's absolutely usable for that with water-based acrylic. The only thing I'd warn you about is just be careful that you don't overbuild. You know, if you needed 3 coats of something to achieve a certain level of transparency with a paint that's been thinned with a thinner, when you're doing it with water, you're probably going to want to do it in 5 coats instead because you don't ever want to put a water-thin paint on in a way that it ever becomes wet or even starts to approach being wet on the surface. So that's the warning with that. In terms of cleaning, can you use water as a cleaner? Again, with water-based acrylic paints, you definitely can as an in-process cleaner. Okay, so for example, if you look at our good friend Angel Giraldez, he keeps a mug of water on the side, and what he does is when he wants to flush in between colors, he just dunks the airbrush in the water and sprays it underwater. It draws water through and just generally kind of gives it a bit of a clean, and then he pulls it out, gives it a wipe, and on he goes. That does work fine. The only time it doesn't work as a cleaner is when you're starting to get anything that's a little bit stubborn. Okay, so I'd always recommend at your end of day clean process, do use the cleaner that's appropriate to the paint that you've been using. It is more effective to use airbrush cleaner throughout the painting process as well, but the question was, can you? And I'd say you can, but only within the painting process. I wouldn't use it only as a cleaner at the end of the painting session.
What if I don't have a quick release for my airbrush? how can I attach it to the compressor?
Yeah, so we get this one a lot, so I'm grateful to be able to answer this question. We maybe should ship our airbrushes differently, I'm not sure, but the way we ship our airbrushes, they always come looking like this. Let me put it in that camera. They always come looking like this, and they have this little fitting on the bottom here, which is called the quick disconnect tail. Now that is designed to fit a quick disconnect system that pushes on the bottom of that. So it pushes on the bottom here like this. So quick disconnect, just like that. Okay, it's nice and convenient. Not everybody has them. If you don't have it, when you've got your airbrush set up, all you do is you just unscrew the quick disconnect tail. And then you've got a thread here, which is what's become pretty much the universal airbrushing thread, 1/8 BSP or 2.7 millimeter NPT. And you can just screw your hose directly onto that. One note, though, is when you're unscrewing this, sometimes what can happen is you might find that you screw the air valve off at the same time. Okay, so if you do that and, whoops, you end up with something that looks like this, that's no problem. Just unscrew the air valve from the quick disconnect. And then you just screw the air valve back into the bottom of the airbrush. So you do not need a quick disconnect system to use our airbrushes. Our airbrushes do ship with the quick disconnect tail ready on the bottom of the airbrush, but you're not obliged to use it. You can just remove it if you just want to screw your hose directly on the bottom. Hope you found that useful. Please leave us a comment if you got a question on these topics or any other ones for that matter, and we will get back to you with an answer. See you on the next one, and thanks for being with us on our channel.